We're going to be getting started here. We're picking up from last week in chapter 7 of the 13th book of Yisrayl, part 1, Gold, Pure Fine Gold, in 2013. And, of course, the title of this sermon is Going for the Gold, number 2, the Pope Inheriting a Divided Kingdom. The Pope Inheriting a Divided Kingdom. And, of course, this was kind of in that time period there, just 5 days prior to, no, this was before the Benedict had resigned. He resigned on the 28th of February, and this sermon was given on the 22nd. But either way, they had inherited a divided kingdom because, remember, the division didn't start in 2013. The division started long back in the days of Cain, because the laws that would govern and keep a kingdom going and strong and in unity were ignored and rejected by those very men who went off and did their own thing outside of the laws of Yahweh. So this is a sermon from 223, 2013, and Pastor gets started in here, and he says, if you look down to verse 4, he says, I was going to have all the things, the little things caught up and worked in and explained everything that I've got, laying aside this very important prophecy in chapter 12 of Daniel. I had it all planned to bring out, and then Yeshua is the one who spoiled it. You can talk to him about it. Speaking of us talking to Yeshua about it, Pastor bringing that out. He said, no, you've got to bring some more on this gold because the people don't understand it. So that's the reason I changed it and started going for the gold. And I know I'll get clearer all the time as we go through this. And of course, Pastor was bringing us to this understanding of the gold, and as we'll cover here in this sermon, the golden oil that was actually shown there. Let's just take a quick look in Zechariah. If you have your books of Yahweh there, because this was shown for us. Zechariah chapter 4 and verse 12, and of course this was talking about the 7 pipes, as you see in verse 2 there. So I said, I see and behold a lampstand all of gold with his bowls for oil on top of this. Now, Zechariah, I remember a long time ago, Pastor was speaking in a sermon, and he said, when the prophets spoke and when they taught and when others listened to them, they understood in the language of the law. Okay, and that's not thouist and theist and thee witheth this type language. It's the language speaking of the law and how it's to be carried out and how things are to be done and what takes place if this takes place and what's the judgment for this. So when the prophets spoke, this is what they had. They had this whole book of Yahweh in their mind, and it's the same thing that we see when Pastor speaks to us. He speaks to us with the plan of Yahweh, the laws of Yahweh, the judgments, the statutes, the ordinances, and so forth in his mind, and these are the things that govern his decisions and so forth. So when we see what's here written in Zechariah chapter 4, of course, we see what was given all the way back in Exodus when Yahweh said to Moshe, see that you make these things according to the pattern shown to you from the house of Yahweh. Okay, and of course, everything that was given to Moshe and everything that's even shown here, and then even what Yeshua talked about when he was with his disciples, it's kind of parabolized in a certain instance, symbolic meaning of the heavenly. Remember, these are a representation, as Hebrews says, these are a representation of the heavenly thing that Yahweh is putting together, because he wasn't concerned with an article of gold. He wasn't concerned with a juice from an olive as much as he was what the teachings that oil represents would produce in the people who receive it. Remember, he's building a family. He's building a kingdom of priests, a people. And all these things were representations of patterns, or a pattern as to how Yahweh was going to bring this plan about. And remember, the closer you got to this holy place, this most holy place, the more righteousness and the purity and the cleanliness was required. And even within that room itself, which we won't get into that, but Pastor does say, we really do need to go back and start studying here in Exodus. You had the finest of woods, and you had the the precious metals and so forth, and the tapestries of fine linen and things like that. And you had, just look at the example of the wood that was in the room, and the ark and so forth. It was all these things were covered with gold, And so Yahweh, he was showing there what was required. If you think about this and think about Revelations chapter 22, verse 14, which talks about, us actually having rights to this great kingdom, and that right is going to be given to us because, as it says, blessed are those who keep his laws, that they may have right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates into the kingdom. So all this, and even what Yeshua said, seek first the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness, because the kingdom to us and for everybody else would be absolutely useless if the righteousness was not taught and kept and upheld there. It would be just like everything we see in the world today. Everybody right now getting ready to prepare for the blasted holidays and to go into debt to give people a stupid gift that, they're going to smile in their face. Oh, wow, I've always wanted one of these. A sock warmer. Oh, that's the best. Did you get a receipt with that too? Because I might want a different color, getting ready to take the things back so they can get some money to go spend it on alcohol or something to go to the Christmas party or a New Year's Eve party that's going to be taking place in a week later, and so everybody's, and this is all a part of this kingdom here of fun and gaiety and division and hatred and war, drown out your sins and entertainment and so forth. It's totally divided against themselves, and that's why we're going to see through this peak of sin, through the love of many growing cold, we're going to see this in part here when the world will be almost brought to complete and total destruction. It's not because everybody's in unity to bring each other to destruction, because the other guy wants to always be on top. He wants to be the one left. He wants to be the survivor. Even though a report came out about the MAD report, mutually agreed destruction, because of all the nuclear weapons that these countries have and they possess, and they have a first strike policy or a preemptive strike where if I just think that my neighbor's going to strike me, I'm going to go ahead and launch the button. Like we saw about those silos, the ballistic missiles that are in the silos dotted throughout the United States, 450 of them. There is no do-over button with those things. When they go out, they go out. You remember when the House of Yahweh played the I think it was the movie Threads? Was it Threads? Yeah, Threads. And because that was the one where they launched the missiles, right? And all those things went out, and it was mutually assured destruction for sure. And the chaos that took place after, there was no joy after that. It was absolute and total misery, and that's what we're going to see the world get to in a very short period of time. They're in misery right now, but they've got the pharmaceutical companies and they've got the entertainment industry to kind of keep them numb to the fact that they're dying. Keep them entertained. What do they have in the hospital room? They got a television for you to watch all the movies and television shows that you want to watch. So let's look over to verse 5. They probably have it in the funeral home if they thought they could get away with it. And verse 5, it's, no. Let's see, I'll read that on 4. Yeah, let's look at verse 5. You might be studying Exodus about the priest, Aaron, and his sons. Now, this won't tell you what we're doing today, but it'll tell you how Yahweh gets his kingdom set up, and, of course, that's what's taking place right now. He's getting a kingdom set up. We may not be wearing the same clothing in the kingdom. We'll probably be wearing the real thing that Yeshua is making for us now. And you remember, even the articles of clothing, and you think about the kingdom, and you think about royalty, and so forth, everything is a representation of something. And even when the royal, the king or the queen or prince or princes, and you have all these other nobles, and in Europe they have the dukes and the duchess and the all the other different offices that they have. They have clothing that distinguishes them from everything else. And even Yahweh gave that in the law in showing that Aaron and his sons and so forth, they were to have clothing and holy garments that distinguished them from the rest of the people. And this is the same pattern that we follow in the house of Yahweh today. You know, I remember when I first came to the House of Yahweh, and I saw the priest, and I looked at the priest with great honor, and I saw these articles of clothing, and the talits were just a little bit different. They're the same thing, but we learned more since then, and they had these shiny gold, you know, lines going down them, and I'm thinking, wow, I want to get me one of those, you know. And when I had the opportunity to get a talit made, I tried to get mine as close as I possibly could, because I knew I couldn't get black on there, because that was the only thing that the priest had there. But I tried to get it as dark blue as I possibly could, you know, because that's what I was looking forward to, was that priesthood and that honor that Yahweh places upon the priest through righteousness only. Through righteousness is where you actually will have the honor. But Yahweh told them to make these things, and in the royal priesthood that Yahweh is putting together now. Remember, we're gonna have a renowned name, or our name is going to go throughout the universe as the sons of Yahweh, the seed of the witness Yisrayl, and so forth. And Pastor said they're going to know of us before we even get there, and they're going to be rejoicing to have us enter into their territory and enter into their galaxy or their cluster of super galaxies to come and fix the chaos that has been brought about by the same kind of kingdom that caused this division against itself and against everybody else, due to the rejecting of Yahweh's laws. If we just look at how simple this is, that just with this body of laws, the 613 laws that govern healthy interaction, you know, healthy communication, it keeps your bodies and your minds healthy, where you can, it keeps it to where you can actually pull a vegetable out of the ground, and you don't have to worry about it being contaminated with a STD or with a new type of microorganism that was never designed to be in there before, or that is designed to be there but be controlled by other things, but now it's out of control because the kingdoms that Yahweh has created are now weakened and they can't do their job. You see, we would be able to eat food that would bring us health. We would be able to breathe air that would benefit us. You know, it's going to be totally different when these laws are kept, and that's what we have to look forward to, because it's not going to be like this forever, and it does have to get worse before it gets better. But our hope is not in mankind destroying themselves, because that's all a part of the plan of Yahweh. He allows mankind to go this way so that they can see with their very own eyes. It's not going to be left to wonder for anybody, mankind or the spirit beings, what going this way without the restriction of Yahweh's laws. Yes, it does restrict you from making your own stupid decisions and bringing sickness, disease, death, and war upon yourself and upon other people. It's a guard. It's like the laws of Yahweh are a guard. It's a parapet for your life. It's a parapet, a safety rail for your family to keep you from falling off of the cliff, so to speak, and to your death. It protects you, and it protects those around you from things that bring harm, okay? The same thing we hear from the peaceful solution. And mankind got away from that, and they said, yeah, I can handle the pain. I can handle the pain. I'll just, I'll take a painkiller, right? And there goes the pharmaceutical industries. Well, yeah, they want to sin. Go ahead and sin. We got a drug for that. And if it hurts even more, we got another drug for that. And then we got another drug to counter a side effect, because you're probably going to have internal bleeding. Let's look at page 66 and look at verse 9. And Pastor's talking here, of course, in between there, he's showing about the clothing and everything that we can get for the feast, and the belts and shoes. In verse 9, he says, here's a belt I had painted, and you can see it looks like a gold belt. If you turn it over, it's brown on the other side. You see it on the other side, but this is the side you're going to see. Okay, and we have a team of workers that can do just about anything. When Yahweh put this camp together, He put together talent. Some in music, some in other fields, but everything is covered. Whether it's the cafeteria, whether it's the making of the holy garments, the building, everything that Yahweh wants done in His camp, He puts that team together. And Yahweh's thinking, when He thinks the big picture. Yahweh thinks Texan in regards to this. In fact, this moral excellence in the workplace is the very thing that would build, as it says at the bottom of that, those two guys shaking hands, building teamwork through character development. In order for there to be teamwork, if you wonder why there's still problems within a team or a group of people, all right, and it just seems like you just can't get along and you keep stepping on each other's toes, well, it's because there is a lack of positive character being practiced there. I remember Pastor saying a long time ago, he said if there's problems within a family, if there's problems specifically within a marriage, it's because the laws of Yahweh aren't being kept there. Because the laws of Yahweh, yes, do govern your marriage. They do, as it says, go behind the bedroom doors and so forth to make sure that the interactions between you and your wife, or between you and your children, or between you and your neighbor are healthy and proper and righteous, and it brings no harm. And you actually build one another up. In fact, to the point to where one thing that always stuck in my mind was when it was said that if your marriage was based on the laws of Yahweh from the very beginning, you would be more of a pillar now than what you were when you first met that person. So when you go into a marriage or any type of relationship, or a partnership, or say relationship with a spouse, or if you're working together as a group or a team to get something done, you should be farther along 10 days or 10 months or a year than you were when you began that work. Okay? If you're not, then you have to go back to the drawing board and see where you're lacking and see where the laws aren't being kept and start building that character through the laws of Yahweh so that you can get the job done. Everything in the end is for us to get this job done together as a team. Yahweh needs this team. He's not just a one-man show, and he expresses that to us that we can't be a one-man show. We can't be a one-man show in doing the work of Yahweh. Remember, he's not building a man of priests. It's a family of priests. A family of priests. So there's many members within a family. A kingdom. What is a king without subjects? What is a king without, a queen or servants or a kingdom of people to rule? He's just a man sitting on a throne with a crown. Nothing, right? So Yahweh's putting together this huge team that's going to actually work together, and we're going to show the opposite of what we see taking place in the governments today, which are under the rule and the governing authority of Satan, the adversary. Remember, the god of this world blinded the minds, and in Revelations 12:9 that she deceives the whole world and so forth. Let's look over to page 67 and verse 17. And Pastor says, regarding this article here from Smart Women, letting your children watch television is hazardous to their health. Hazardous to your health sometimes, too, if you try to turn it off. Makes them violent, it says. And he says, there's a long article, and he says, he was talking about the man here who, what was that guy's name? The Blade man. He was a runner, and he was being charged with killing his wife or his girlfriend, and the police officer that charged him, he was actually being brought up on murder charges himself. So you see that, these things that are taking place, the very ones that are supposed to be reliable witnesses, they have what they say, he who lives in the glass house shouldn't cast stones, shouldn't throw stones. They've got skeletons in their closets too. And when these things are found out, people go, oh, wow, man, well, maybe we shouldn't have taken his word for it because he's doing the very same thing. And you see that a lot with politicians. You see that a lot with judges. Just look at the news. People who are in positions where they should be guarding and watching over and protecting society are actually polluting society. They're taking advantage of society. They're defiling society. From teachers to lawmakers to judges, even people who are put in positions to deal with people who have been subject to domestic or sexual violence. They're going and taking advantage of those people in their weakness and doing the very same thing that they were coming to them for. So who can you trust in this world? You can't trust anybody. The only one you can trust is Yahweh and his laws, and the one sent in the house of Yahweh to guard you and protect you and guide you from the mess, the hell that mankind has created for himself in these last days. Now look at verse 19. He says, and then you see the sheriff, and of course this was being investigated, they said, by Breckenridge Police Department. Stephens County District Attorney, Rangers, and the Attorney's General officers, and none of them have any answers. They were doing all this investigation. They couldn't come up as to what to do to get this problem solved and what was the cause of this problem and so forth. So the world, and basically, and Pastor's showing this here, the world doesn't have any answers. It's like they're groping in the dark, as we brought out, as the Scripture shows. They're groping in the dark, and they're hoping for a solution to solve their problems, to give them some ease, some peace of mind, because it seems like our law enforcement are not able to handle the power they've got, and the judicial system is not able to make a sound, right decision, and in the schools they can't really focus on teaching children so that they won't become criminals, because they have to worry about being shot, or murdered in school. Man, you can't even go and just kind of wash your cares away at the end of a tough and rough week at the movie theater, because somebody will come in there and shoot that place up. Can't even go get a cup of coffee with somebody coming and holding the place up hostage. Is there no place safe on the world? Is what the people are thinking. Yeah, there is a safe place. It's a protected place, and the only way you can find it is through prophecy. But the world has rejected prophecy, the Scriptures, the Holy Scriptures, which shows mankind and tells mankind from the very beginning, seek the place I choose to establish my house, Yahweh says. And there go. And they'll learn the reverence of Yahweh, and that will be your protection in these last days. It will protect your life, it will protect your family, your health, and so forth. Now look down to verse 21. He says, now going on to the gold. The sermon I brought last week, it might have not seemed to fit in, but there's a reason why I brought this about the Pope. Now, it's a scandal in the Catholic Church that's bringing it down, and many, many scandals have been coming up over the last few years in the Catholic Church. In fact, they recently found, remember, there was a man that was investigating the Bank of Vatican, and he had uncovered that the Catholic Church was involved in money laundering. Yeah, that was a surprise, right? Now, I'm sure they were more dealing with dirty money, and that's why they were trying to clean it. But not too long ago, it was just about a week or two ago, they found out that there was millions. Now, they were saying they were broke, and the Catholic Church was having hardship and time finding money. They found billions of dollars, millions or billions of dollars, kind of tucked away somewhere, and they're going, oh wow, that's great. We're glad you found that, right? Oh. I don't know how that got under that rock right there. Okay? And so there's scandals that are taking place, from the financial end to the abuse end, that's, with the priest and so forth. And remember, these men who, we look at them, and we look at them as the Catholic Church, and they are a separate entity from the House of Yahweh. But remember what was shown in Moshe 3, that you only have I known from all the families of the earth, Yahweh said. And so they were all from these 12 tribes, okay? And remember, the 12 tribes, this is not any surprise. They fought against each other. They had hatred towards each other. And there was even a time period where they almost wiped out an entire tribe. And Yahweh didn't allow that to occur. But this is the mindsets that we see coming forth from these men, and that's what they are, men who reject the laws of Yahweh. And the next pope, he said, I wrote a letter, what his likeness is going to be, who he will be like. And the Pope inherited right now a kingdom, or a divided kingdom. And these are the last stages of the prophecy in Daniel that I noticed one of our young priests bringing. And of course, like I said at the very beginning here, Benedict resigned the 28th of February, and Francis took office 3/13/13, just not even quite a month after that resignation. In verse 23, he says, but this new Pope, now, he inherited a kingdom that was prophesied. And, of course, Hebrews, let me see here. Let me read a little bit more. And then, of course, they could have taken your place. Yes, let me read this. And, of course, they could have taken your place, because it was offered to them. And if they had taken your place, there would be no need for this house of Yahweh in these last days. But Yahweh, in his great wisdom, of course, he knew that they would not, even though he had given it to them. He knew they would not take the place of the ones who would come in these last days. He knew the very reason why they wouldn't. They could have, if they would have put their minds to it, and would have listened to the prophets who came in Yahweh's name, teaching them the law, showing them the prophecies, offering this to them. It was offered, otherwise they couldn't take it our place if it wasn't offered. But they rejected it. They rejected it, just like Yahweh said to Samuel, they were doing from the very day I brought them out of Egypt. They're rejecting you. They're rejecting me is what he said to them. They're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. They're rejecting my laws, these body of laws that will govern them as a nation to make them my kingdom. What higher kingdom could you belong to than the kingdom of Yahweh? There is no kingdom higher. Where do you go? Well, I'm from the United States. Oh, I'm from Great Britain. Oh, I'm from Czechoslovakia. I'm from the kingdom of Yahweh. There is no higher kingdom. That's the kingdom that's going to be over everything, governing all life, all creation, forever. It's never going to be given to another people at all. There's not going to be an end of the run of our campaign. We're not going to have to campaign every 4 years, or righteous, we'll do it every 7 years. No, we're going to be, once we're there, we're there. The only thing that could pull us out is our actions. But we will have proven by that time that we will not break the law of Yahweh. We will not have the thought or the desire within us to break the law of Yahweh. And that's why the scripture says your people will have proven themselves obedient to the law on the day you go forth in power. And they will reign with Yahshua. They will reign with Yahweh. We will reign with the one sent who will forever be our head and our teacher. And we will go and restore this earth and bring it to a perfect, healthy state as Yahweh intended for it to be at the very beginning. Let's look over to verse 26 on page 68. He says, now if you go over to Daniel 2, he gives the ending of this, or it's cut off close to the ending of it, but he gives enough to show who will bring this about. Now, of course, in Daniel chapter 2, and you can just kind of write that down for your notes there, we see in verse 30, where it speaks of, not far enough back, where it speaks of in the days of these kings, Yahweh is going to put a kingdom together, right? Who will take these kingdoms by force. Well, not by force. The kingdoms will be given to them, is what I meant. That was 2, right? Yeah, in verse 44, it says, in the days of these kings, Yahweh in heaven will appoint a kingdom of priests, which will never be destroyed, nor the kingdom be left to another people. And that's the promise that we have. But it will break into pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it will stand forever. Okay, and they're actually breaking themselves down. They're breaking themselves to pieces with their works. But we will take these people. Remember, there's going to be 2 billion that's going to be left after all this is said and done. There's going to be 2 billion people that are going to come to the house of Yahweh, and we're going to teach them the laws of Yahweh, and we're going to show them Yahweh. We're going to show them the face of Yahweh. We're going to be the light of Yahweh to them. And look at verse 28. Now the gold, if you don't understand it by now, the gold, what we're speaking of is this golden oil that Yahweh promised would come forth in these last days from a person he calls a branch. And that's the last work, as Revelation says. Now you got to remember Revelations 10, which speaks of in the days of the seventh trumpet, the end. That's when the end is going to come. And when that branch speaks, that's the finishing work. That's the finishing of this 7 eras that Yahweh said he was going to give to mankind in a time period of 6,000 years, okay, a proving period as a test to mankind. And that's when he's going to put the finishing touches on this work and select out those who will be a part of this great kingdom and allow this prophesied destruction to come upon the earth so that we can start phase 2 of this plan. That's the finishing of the golden priesthood. And that's what we have set before us, this opportunity, this honor, and it is a great honor, and we should look to it as an honor to be a part of a priesthood, a golden priesthood that will never, ever give in to sin. It's never going to, fall into the acceptance of bribery. You're never going to turn on, Yahweh television and see, a priest indicted for embezzlement from the house of Yahweh or anything like that. There won't be any sexual assaults or taking advantage of anyone. All those things will be done away with because the character of Yahweh will be within us, and we will teach it to others so it will be within them also. Remember, the voice, you'll hear a voice saying, "This is the way, walk in it." And they'll heed that voice because they're not going to have the distraction that we see today coming forth from the other kingdom. They're going to have the kingdom of Yahweh teaching them, and that's going to be their assurance to peace, joy, and abundant living forever. So may Yahweh bless your understanding. If you'll all please stand, I'll turn it over to the great Kahan, Bezalel Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. We're continuing with the Sabbath evening law class here tonight, chapter 7, the sermon given in 2013. And Pastor is, you see his picture here on page 68. And when that branch speaks, that's the finishing work. That's the finishing of the golden priesthood. And Pastor's wanting us to get this in our minds, get this vision, this picture in our minds of what Yahweh is building here. What we've been looking at here tonight is how really what we see here is in these people at that time is they really didn't appreciate what Yahweh was building in store for them in the future. And what we're looking at there is the characteristics of a divided kingdom. And they didn't appreciate what was to come. They were more interested in their own interests and their immediate gain, like their status. And even Yeshua had a run-in with the disciples about this when they asked, well, who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom? And he had to set them straight with that because they were being influenced, already thinking in that way, this status idea. Here in verse 39, Pastor goes on to say, I didn't know there was any gossip left in the house of Yahweh. And of course, when we hear a gossip, we think of it in a negative connotation usually. And just a generic definition of that word gossip, I think it ought to be in quotation marks there, but it's casual or unconstrained conversation, just without restraint, just careless, or reports about other people typically involving details that are not confirmed as being true. Going around spreading rumors, and I prefer that word rumor. It means about the same thing. And just a common definition here is a rumor is a story or statement, generally just circulating around. It could be like the general opinion of people because of what they've heard, even though it hasn't been confirmed as to being fact. Now, what Pastor is... we're all familiar with this common definition, but what Pastor's forming in your mind here is this greatest gossip in a positive sense. That is, you could bring forth rumors, if you will, of this world to come, or the teachings, to build up the house. And remember, Yahweh speaks as it was. To build up the work. He speaks as though things already are. I want to give you some examples of some righteous gossip. Did you hear this one? Genesis 1:26. Then Yahweh said, I'll make man in my image, according to my likeness. What? Yeah. And they will have rulership over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, and over all the earth. Oh, wait till Pharaoh hears about this one. Over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. Wow. That should get some discussion started. How about this one in Genesis 12? Did you hear what Yahweh said to Abraham? I'll make of you a great nation, and I'll bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and curse him who curses you. And in you shall all families of the earth be blessed. Ooh, I want a cut of that. Here's my family. Come on, family, let's go get our piece of the pie here. Here it is again. Oh, wait, this one's different. Genesis 26:4. And I will make your descendants multiply as the stars of heaven. I will give to your descendants all these lands, and your seed all the nations of the earth, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. So now we have whole nations. So come on, Mr. President, let's go get our piece of the pie. And I got a marker back here somewhere in Daniel. Let's see, we know where Daniel is. Okay, maybe I didn't. You see where I'm going with this is that these verses are full of questions. What about that? How is that possible? How is he going to do that? Full of discussions. Daniel 5:13. Things that we can talk about to build up Yahweh's house and to bring Yahweh's plan to our memories. So Daniel was brought in before the king. The king spoke and said to Daniel, are you the same Daniel? The captive guy? Yeah. Of the children of Yada. I've heard of you. Yeah, the king, my father, brought you out of Yada, right? I've heard of you. That the spirit of the holy Elohim is in you. Daniel's preparing his response now. Well, Mr. King, we're not talking about gods here, but and that light, understanding is unsurpassed wisdom is found in you. So the king had heard a rumor about Daniel. Word gets around. Did you hear what the House of Yahweh said? I've read this article. 2 Samuel 20, verse 18. Then she spoke a saying, and the correct translation here is, they were commanded to speak long ago. Back, my great-great-granddad said, whoever, long ago, saying to receive an answer, ask it able, and that would settle a matter. Little rumors, little things spread along. Well, did you hear what Pastor said? Romans 9, verse 6. However, it is not as though Yahweh's plan has failed, for it is not everyone who is a descendant of Israel who belongs to Israel. Did you hear that? Well, who is Israel? Well, let's talk about that. What if Pastor said, well, I can see you're all a bunch of misfits anyway, so why don't you just all go home? Romans 4:17. As it is written, I have made you a father of many nations. He is our father in the sight of Yahweh, in whom he believed. Why doesn't Pastor say that? He doesn't believe that. Why doesn't he believe that? You're not worth the trouble? Because he sees what Yahweh has prophesied for us, for you. And he believes the prophecies. He believes the testimonies. The Father who gives life to the dead. Wow, how does he do that? How do you put the dead back to life? And calls things that are not as though they already were. Pastor sees what we will become, what we are becoming. Everything Pastor does is for the upbuilding of Yahweh's house. And even if he speaks something that he gets the cart before the horse, he knows what's coming. And he's getting us prepared for it. Now, on the other hand, we have our accuser. And if we do her job for her, then we belong to her, which is Satan, taking her inspiration and carrying it out like we know something and when we're foolish. What your teacher says to do, that's what a person will do. But if we hold fast to Yahweh as our teacher, what does Yahweh say to do? He says, build up this house, build up your mind, take in this golden oil, which is pure and undefiled. Make this a habit in your life. Verse 37. This is in verse 40 of the book here, in verse 37. In the scriptures, we're in Daniel chapter 2. You, O king, are a king of kings, for Yahweh is in heaven, or for Yahweh in heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. So here he had position to influence the people, to affect the direction of the people's lives, as the law says, that the king has a responsibility to teach the people the laws of Yahweh, to bring it forth to them. So he had this opportunity. He had all the resources at hand to take hold of this kingdom. This kingdom had the chance of being the gold kingdom. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the fowls of the air, he has given them into your hands, and he has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. Now, since he didn't accomplish it in that time, Yahweh had already built it into his plan, seeing that would fail at that time, but he carried it forward. And now here we are, taking this place, being given this opportunity to take hold of this kingdom that Yahweh is offering. What you see of his kingdom that Yahweh gave him, and he could have been doing our job right now, but Yahweh knew he wouldn't. He knew what was going to take place, and he knew how long it was going to take to put hooks in the Leviathan's mouth. And this Leviathan is this crazed, out of control, beastly, devouring system that's run amok. What's it going to take to turn that around? This great Leviathan that's bringing down the people. Don't let your children watch television. It's detrimental. What does Yahweh tell us to do with our children? He tells us to train them up in the way they should go. In Deuteronomy 6, he shows us how to teach, what to teach. Teach the laws of Yahweh. Train their minds at all times. What does TV train? Well, it trains in a way that's resulted in lust, fornication, and adultery, sickness, disease, and illness, unsoundness in mind or body. The pain becomes their pride, becomes their lifestyle. Their sicknesses become their lifestyles. They accept it. This is what people look into this fakery, this falsehood that they put up in the television. They look at that, and it looks so much better than what they're experiencing in their personal lives, and they become dissatisfied. And when they become dissatisfied with what they have, then that leads to contention within their families, between themselves and their children and them, and their mates. And that dissatisfaction leads to the contention, which then turns into greed, wanting more and more. And when they can't get it, they start fighting for it. And if that person's going to come, you tell me that person's going to come over here and take it away from me, they take up arms and they go and fight wars. So that person, allegedly, can't come over and take something. Take what? I don't know, something they saw on television? Some fantasy of the mind? Look at the people who are living those fantasies. You know, the actors and actresses that go through that make the movies, and they go home to their personal lives. And the only ones of those you ever see have a glimmer of shine to them are those who practice some glimmer of character, of positive character. And we do see a little bit of that from time to time. They even, they call it an immersion lifestyle. You know, they have TVs in their cars. They leave them on all day and all night. It goes into their minds. So the children are corrupted from their birth, from before they were born. They're born into corruption and a confused mind. As Deuteronomy 5 and 6 says, we're to train up a child for peace. But they're training their children, whether they realize it or not, and they embrace war too. They train them up for war. Well, this is what can be put in the minds of the children today. And they have confused minds already that they're born with. And the media carries that influence to all the world. It's an ugly mess. Now, in all of this, all around the gods of Hollywood and the presidents and the great people, you see the popes and the cardinals circulating about this mass, giving them their approval and doing the things that they do to give support to that system. And you can look at them and you see them in their gold robes and their miters and their caps. And they look like those people that are described in the scriptures. Maybe even that Aaronic priesthood. But they gave up the true gold, didn't they? That pure and undefiled, righteous character. So he said to the king, "You are this head of gold, but after you will arise another kingdom inferior to you, then yet a third kingdom of bronze which will bear rule over all the earth. Then comes the fourth kingdom, and of course the fourth kingdom is led by 10 religions, and then an 11th religion joins them, and the 11th religion uproots 3 and takes them to Rome." So here we see this continual degradation, this breaking down of this kingdom. Each kingdom is progressively weakening. The fourth kingdom will be strong as iron. Since iron breaks into pieces and subdues all things, it will break in pieces and crush. But the interesting thing here then is it's not going to disappear. It's going to divide. It's going to take over the whole earth. But remember, sin causes division and disunity. So this is what we see breaking this kingdom apart. Now remember, wherever there's a man or beast, this kingdom of yours is going to take it over. They're going to rule over it, and that's what we see in Washington right now. This is what we see in the political arenas. That's what we see in the Vatican. That's why North Korea is getting ready to go to nuclear war, and this is why all the other nations are trying to get themselves ready for the same things, looking for the bigger guns, the bigger bombs. Now remember, we heard this week in the news that the U.S. is now behind China economically, but militarily it will stay strong. It'll remain superior. Now within these systems of governments, not just here in the U.S., but throughout the world, we see it affects even the civil servants, those who are there that should serve the public, but they become corrupted by the system as well that they serve in. And we even saw an example of this in Moshe when he was in Pharaoh's house. Remember, he was influenced for a while, and how did he choose to deal with that servant who went and took a hold of one of his brothers, and then he went and retaliated and buried, killed him and buried his body and so forth, and that there was repercussions, but you can see that influence was upon him until he turned fully to Yahweh and rejected that way of life. When you think of this iron and clay, you can imagine iron and clay being two very different properties and having different characteristics. And there's really nothing to unify those two. You could press them together, get them wet, whatever. They can kind of stick, but then they fall apart later, and you can't get them together. And I was thinking, just a personal note of what binds people or organization or groups together, or what binds a family together. Those things which bind and hold, and those things which maybe bind for a while but then fall apart. And I was thinking about the difference between character and personality. And it occurred to me that in my thinking, it seems like there's roughly people who are attracted to character and people who are attracted to personality. And I think if you think of examples in your own life, you can kind of see how this takes place, where people easily gravitate towards someone who has a great personality. They're very attractive that way. But then there's others that look at character. And even though the personality may not be real flashy, they'll tend to stick with people who are trustworthy or faithful and things like that. There's something to think about in our personal relationships, with people. What do we value the most? What's the most important? Not everybody has this great, flashy, outgoing personality, but they may have a very solid character. And with a solid character, they can add to that personality too. They can be kind, caring, compassionate, loving, encouraging. Those types of things are greatly appreciated and greatly valued as well. But we've seen throughout history how this kingdom has continued to divide. It's remained separated because of sin. If they ever come together on agreement with anything, it doesn't last for very long. But this head of gold that they rejected the golden oil, and they persecuted the prophets that Yahweh sent to warn them, and they persecuted them, and they said, "We don't want nothing to do with you. Don't prophesy to us in the name of Yahweh." Every time they tried to correct him, they rebuked him. And that mixture would never hold together. But what holds us together here in the house of Yahweh? And as Pastor observed, at first he wondered, how am I going to do this? But over time, he saw people grow and become the greatest people on the face of the earth. The character of everyone who overcomes, who comes here to the house of Yahweh, improves as long as they endure. Our personalities may not be flashy, but our character is sound, right? And we have no mind to do anyone any harm, but do our best to guide and direct them in the ways of peace. Now, we've actually seen in some of our leaders that they can have a certain amount of influence, even for better things, if they can persuade a majority. We've seen President Obama do this. If he can get the pull of the majority vote, he can get a few things too. But the problem is that And for every beneficial law they pass, along with it are special interests and other riders that go along with it that are for some particular party and some minority group, maybe somebody with a lot of money and influence, and that continues that mixture, partly strong and partly weak. And so as this continues, each new leader, inherits more lies, more corruption. But in the last days of these great kingdoms that have come down to this generation right now and so divided, and their minds are so confused because they brought this confusion into the minds of the people that it's inherited. It's even in their veins, the broth and abominable things. Out of all this, Yahweh could still establish a work and call forth a people. Yahweh wants just the opposite, and here is what he's saying. This golden head right here is going to become this last day's house of Yahweh that will be sucking in this golden oil, not the broth of abominations, but the golden oil of complete obedience. Complete obedience to Yahweh's laws. And in the days of these kings, Yahweh in heaven will appoint a kingdom of priests. If you remember the setup of the kingdom that Yahweh set up under Moshe with the Aaronic priesthood and his sons, now the Catholics took a hold of that and they used it to influence the people. And they may have borne a resemblance physically, looking at them, but they mixed it all up. And they added to it the worship of Dagon with the fish hat and the mixture of the sword and the cross, the sword that they call the cross. And now we see clearly how they're bringing in war. It's the Leviathan, the great sea monster that's accepted. The sea monster, the sea of people. Remember the great sea opposing Yahweh. These four kingdoms are still ruling. They're just separated into pieces, broken into pieces, but they still control the whole earth. And rather than building a kingdom of righteous people, they're building for depopulation. But their kingdom is going down, and Yahweh shows, I've showed you this over and over, how it will end in nuclear destruction. This golden oil also gives you, or is going to be given you by our high priest. Pastor points out that Aaron and his sons, meaning priests, of which there were many, many priests called Aaron and his sons. So we can see here a priesthood, how it can be built up through the preaching, the teaching of the message, building it up in our minds, building it up in our behaviors so that we will live and choose to live as Yahweh does according to perfect righteousness. And this is how we become the sons of Israel, through that perfect obedience. In Yachanan, the book of Yachanan, it points out, I don't think we have time, I think it's in chapter 5 or 6, but it talks about Yeshua receiving this power, having this ability to resurrect, to bring forth the dead. This golden oil also gives you, or is going to be given you by our high priest, Yeshua, the power that was given to him, like in Yachanan, where he says, yes, resurrecting the dead is a power that's given to the Son of Man, because I am the Son of Man, not the Son of God, but the Son of Man. You see that power given to the Son of Man, not given to a God or God being or God the Son of Himself, to Himself. But, through this, Yahweh shows His plan, how He's able to bring man to perfection, and how we can follow in that pattern and be brought to perfection as well. If people would just get that in their head, they wouldn't run off with all these fairy tales in their mind. But He was the Son of Man, and that Son of Man, from the Son of Man will actually come forth our power. It's coming forth right now to you, whether you know it or not. He is, Yahshua, giving you the power to learn this and get the total picture so you can see this total plan of Yahweh and start pulling for the family instead of against it. And at the bottom of the page, we see this in bold letters. Yahshua is giving you the power. That power is that empowerment or ability, the time and the resources. Yahweh's been merciful to extend our time, to give us space of time to overcome, to convert, and He's given us the resources, the House of Yahweh, all of its teachings, and the Peaceful Solution with all of its teaching, plus the ability to practice it as teachers and students. That is the power, the ability that Yahweh's given us to learn this and get the total picture so you can see this total plan of Yahweh and choose, and you certainly will once you get it in your mind, to choose to be a part of it.